In the 21st century, as of right now, the United States is the Earth's only superpower. The closest country to the US are China and Russia. The US has complicated relations at best and complete hatred at worst with China and Russia, but there are no major conflicts or disputes taking place between them. It might not seem weird today, but as recently as 30 years ago, the United States had a rival. The US was in a Cold War, an intense and bloody rivalry with the Soviet Union for nearly half a century over trade and influence, causing civil wars and revolts in many countries just to get a slight advantage over the other. The only reason they did this is because if they had a traditional war, they would make humans go nearly extinct and probably cause the end of civilization with the sheer destructive power of nuclear bombs. So how did the US beat the USSR? And for that matter, how did the US win out over other countries like Britain and Germany to become the world's only superpower? The US doesn't have an obvious advantage, like being as large as Russia or as populated as China. So what factors led the United States becoming the world's only superpower? Great natural defense. If you read history, you'll often see countries with powerful and horrible neighbors like Poland or Korea can't have much time to advance their civilization because they are too busy being invaded or occupied. Poland and Korea have only been completely independent for a few decades at this point. A reason the US has done a lot better than other countries is because of its great geography. All of the US's enemies are oceans away from its heartlands, and the countries the US are bordering are friendly, Canada and Mexico, which the United States has significantly more power than both nations combined. So even if relations soured, the US wouldn't have much to worry about. And the added bonus of the US having the most powerful navy in the world since World War II makes the US virtually impossible to beat in a traditional war. You can see in history that even the most powerful nations can collapse or get significantly weakened if it keeps having huge wars with its neighbors. For example, the British Empire, who won both world wars, still had to face huge consequences for having two huge wars that close to each other. The conflict strained the treasury significantly, and in World War II, Britain had significant infrastructure damage at home and in the colonies. And due to that, and a huge loss of prestige made them lose their superpower status and eventually their empire. Britain isn't the only superpower weakened by consistent warfare. There are countless others like Napoleonic France, Germany, and the Ottoman Empire who eventually crumbled from the consequences of several wars. But thanks to the US's geographic position, it could mostly pick and choose which wars to get involved in. The last time the United States' existence was put in danger by a foreign power was in the War of 1812 against Britain. With the US having to worry less about foreign threats than most countries, the US leaders could focus more resources at home or on their own geopolitical goals. A unifying culture with no majority ethnic group and one major language. I know this is 3 points, but they all kind of correlate with each other, and I'm kind of lazy. A big problem a nation could, and most of them have faced, is that a majority group could try to oppress minority groups, or that a minority group tries to secede from the nation. In the United States, this problem rarely comes up in modern-day politics. Maybe it isn't rare enough, but it's been a lot worse. Due to the Native Americans having a very low population after the introduction of Old World diseases, the United States' demographics have mostly been shaped by immigrants from many different countries and continents. Because of the US's ethnic and racial diversity, the US wasn't founded on the ideals of national unity like most nations, but on the ideals of freedom and equality. Since the US wasn't built on the foundations of national unity, there isn't much room for people to argue that the state exists solely for the benefit of a single group. So it would be pretty hard for the US to end up with leaderships like the one seen in Europe in the 30s and 40s. Even compared to the other countries in the Americas with low native populations and high immigration, the US has by far the most ethnic and racial diversity. Due to the US having no majority ethnic group and one major language, the US is less divided by these grounds, but more by class and beliefs. As a result of the US having no major ethnic or lingual divides, the chances of an independence movement seen in the Soviet Union in the 90s or in European empires in the 20th century are much less likely. And with the US having no majority ethnic group, immigrants from all over the world can move there without feeling as alienated as they would be in other countries. And with English being the most taught language in the world, for the average immigrant, the US is probably the easiest place to move to. With the US's level of immigration, even if the base population starts having low birth rates or if a major disaster happens, the US population can stay the same or keep growing due to the immigrants moving there. And with this, the US can't end up with as big of a problem as Japan, with one of the lowest birth rates in the world and a declining population. A factor behind Japan's falling population could be because Japan's population, which is 80 to 90% Japanese, could make a potential immigrant of another ethnicity or race feel more alienated than in other countries. Combined with the fact that Japanese is rarely learned out of Japan, makes Japan a less likely place for immigrants to move to because of all the hurdles they'd have to jump over. And since Japan's base population is falling, with no immigration, it means that Japan's entire population would be falling, which the US wouldn't have to worry about. A very stable government. This may seem like a joke to some of you, but I truly believe that the United States has one of the most stable governments in world history. Unlike a lot of other countries around the world, the United States hasn't had a change in government in its history. The US has the second oldest constitution in the world, only beaten by San Marino. Number 2 wasn't good enough in my opinion, which is why I've sent several letters to the president and several other politicians petitioning for San Marino's immediate destruction. But ignoring that, the modern-day United States has gotten closer to the ideals the Founding Fathers laid down. Early in the U.S.'s history, the Declaration of Independence said that all men were created equal, but all Americans weren't treated equally until rather recently. Economy. Last but probably expected is the U.S.'s strong economy. Thanks to all the things I've mentioned above, the U.S. could spend a lot of time and resources on its home economy. It also helps that the U.S. has a crap ton of natural resources, good infrastructure, a lot of navigable waterways, and tons of farmland. Thanks to this, the United States could solve most of its problems by just crapping out money. So in the end, will the U.S. remain a superpower? Probably. Is it going to be the world's sole superpower? Probably not. With the rise of China's economic and political power, it would be possible to see a second Cold War. But if you're anxious about this, don't worry. Society has moved past the possibility of nuclear war. Right? Right? Okay, maybe having a nuclear bunker won't be a bad idea.